Today we're going to talk about a single powerful image from the book of Revelation, the open door. Now, you might think of it as just an entrance, but it's so much more. It's actually a kind of key, a conceptual key that unlocks the whole purpose of this incredibly complex book, connecting everything from ancient stories to modern psychology and even, believe it or not, theoretical physics.
So, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the doorway as a literary symbol. Then, we're going to dive into the surprising psychology behind it. From there, we'll explore how it shows up in spiritual experiences and even how it connects to ideas in physics. And finally, we'll pull it all together to see what it really means for Revelation's core message.
All right, let's start at the beginning. To really get this, we have to establish what this symbol is and where its incredible narrative power comes from. And for that, we have to go right to the source.
Okay, this is the moment. This is the pivot point. John, the author of Revelation, is really specific here. He doesn't just say he had a vision or got zapped into heaven. He says a door opened. And that's not just a minor detail, it is absolutely deliberate. It's a signal to you, the reader, that everything's about to change. You're moving from one reality to a completely different one.
What's so fascinating is that this idea is, well, it's everywhere in our stories. Think about it. Alice doesn't just stumble into Wonderland. She has to go down the rabbit hole. The kids in Narnia don't just find another country. They have to walk through a wardrobe. These doorways, they create a real, physical separation between worlds. They completely change the rules of the game for the characters. So John is tapping into a storytelling tool that we all understand on a really deep, almost instinctive level.
And here's the thing. John didn't just invent this out of thin air. His imagery is plugged directly into centuries of Jewish prophetic tradition. I mean, you've got Isaiah and Ezekiel having these incredible visions of God's throne room, and Daniel with his apocalyptic visions. All of this comes from a tradition of temple mysticism, where the idea of passing through a veil into a sacred space, the Holy of Holies, was absolutely central. John is building on a very, very old and powerful foundation.
So, we've seen it as a literary tool. But what if I told you it's also a real, measurable thing that happens inside your brain every single day? Let's look at how this idea gets even more tangible.
Come on, you know you've done this. You get up, you walk out of the living room and into the kitchen with a clear mission, and then you stop. And you stand there thinking, wait, what did I come in here for? It's super common, and it's not just you being forgetful. There's a real scientific reason this happens.
Yep, it's actually called the doorway effect. Studies have shown that when you physically walk through a doorway, your brain treats it as an event boundary. It essentially hits the refresh button. It files away the thoughts from the old room to make mental space for the new room. Your brain is literally clearing itself out to get ready for a new context.
So what does this have to do with Revelation? Well, everything. Think about John's original audience. They were facing brutal persecution. By starting this vision with a doorway, he's basically inviting them to trigger their own doorway effect. He's asking them to perform a psychological reset, to file away the fear and chaos of their world and step into a new mental space, a new reality where God is the one in charge.
And this idea of a mental reset, it's not just some weird brain glitch or a clever literary trick. It's actually something that people intentionally use as a core part of their spiritual lives.
You hear this kind of thing all the time. People describe prayer, or reading scripture, or just quiet time as a conscious choice to cross a threshold. It's about deliberately separating themselves from all the noise of daily life to enter a different kind of realm, a more peaceful, focused, spiritual one. In fact, meditation is a perfect example of this. The whole point for many people is to consciously and intentionally use a mental doorway. You're guided to visualize a threshold to leave the normal world behind. That doorway becomes the tool you use to shift from an external focus to an internal spiritual space. It's a choice to cross an event boundary in your own mind.
Okay, so this has a huge implication for how we're supposed to read Revelation. It means it's not a book you're meant to read like a passive spectator, just taking notes on what's going to happen. No way. That doorway at the start of chapter 4, that's an invitation. It's for you to really get what the vision is about. You're being asked to step through that door right alongside John.
All right, now we're going to get a little weird, so stick with me, because this is where it gets really fascinating. We've talked literature and psychology, but what if this whole other side isn't just a mental state? What if it's a feature of actual physical reality that we just can't see? We all saw this picture in science class, right? The little atom that looks like a tiny solar system with electrons orbiting the nucleus. It's pretty much an icon. Well, here's the thing. It's totally wrong. And we've known it's been wrong for over 100 years. Reality on the smallest scales is much, much stranger than that.
The truth is, modern physics tells us that at the most fundamental level of reality, there's no solid stuff. Not really. It's all just invisible, vibrating fields of energy that fill up all of space. And what we think of as solid matter is just a little ripple, a concentrated vibration in one of those fields. The solid world you feel around you is basically an illusion your brain creates by interpreting these fields.
Which brings us to something called the zero-point field. What we think of as empty space isn't empty at all. It is a bubbling, seething sea of energy with tiny particles flashing in and out of existence constantly. Now think about the implication here. The spiritual world John describes could, in theory, exist all around us, right now, just in a dimension or on a frequency that our senses aren't built to pick up.
And this really comes down to the limits of our own perception. Our brains are absolute masters at filtering things out. There's this famous experiment, you might have heard of it, the invisible gorilla. People were told to watch a video and count how many times a basketball was passed, and because they were so focused on that, they completely missed a person in a gorilla suit walking right through the middle of the game. Their brains just edited it out, which has to make you wonder, right? What is my brain editing out right now?
Okay, so we've looked at this from a bunch of different angles: literature, psychology, spirituality, even physics. Now let's tie all these threads together and see how it completely reframes the whole purpose of John's vision. When you look at it this way, you realize Revelation is maybe less about being a literal roadmap of the end times and a lot more about being a book of deep, profound comfort. That doorway isn't just a portal to the future. It's an invitation to see a deeper, truer reality that exists right now. A reality where, no matter how chaotic our world seems, there's a divine order behind it all. It's not about changing what you see, but changing how you see.
And here's a final, really cool parallel from physics. Scientists like Stephen Hawking have explored the idea that information can't actually be destroyed, ever. Now, think about who you are, your memories, your personality, everything that makes you you. At its core, it's just an incredibly complex pattern of information. And if information can't be destroyed, well, that provides a kind of scientific framework for the idea that who we are might just persist beyond our physical bodies. It lines up perfectly with Revelation's message. There is a more permanent reality behind this temporary one.
So, what's the big takeaway here? How should we read a book like Revelation? Well, a much richer way is to engage with it on all these levels. See the doorway for the powerful literary symbol it is. Let it prompt that psychological reset in your own mind. Be open to the spiritual experience of crossing a threshold. And finally, just consider the possibility that it's all pointing to a deeper reality that our brains usually filter out.
And that leaves us with one last kind of mind-bending thought. If we know the doorway effect is real, and we know our perception is incredibly limited, what if a deeper, spiritual reality really is coexisting with ours all the time? What invisible gorilla is walking through the room with us right now that our brains have just decided isn't important enough to see?